Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave.
On behalf of every father and every mother.
Wings for freedom. On behalf of our
Warriors. And paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have an excellent show for you today. First, I will be covering the news as always. That'll be followed by Germany to Ukraine's report. Then I've got a few extra pieces of news that we can just discuss briefly that didn't quite make it into the full segment. Please also hit like and subscribe. It really helps us out. It helps promote the stream. A lot of people see it that wouldn't otherwise see it. I think we've finally gotten out of the woods with YouTube. It seems like they super didn't like our old intro. Our visual designer, Chris, made an excellent new intro for us, violence-free, and so far, so good. So thanks, everyone, for your support during the dark times of YouTube. I'm hoping we're getting back on track and we're getting like a little bit more, we're getting recognized as a not bad people by YouTube slowly over time. And then also check out our Twitter and our BlueSky. That's where we do most of our talking or posting about updates and stuff. And of course, we have our website. That's kind of the main our main body of work. It's got all of the research from our researchers, and it's got a lot of great information like maps and technical information. So if you guys want to check out a lot of very useful, interesting information, check out Tochnyi.info. So, without any further delay, I will now jump into the news. These are the main headlines as of February 23rd, 2025. First up, we have operations. A Ukrainian drone operation disrupted an oil pumping facility in Russia's Krasnodar Oblast by targeting its power substation. On February 20th, a drone attack focused on a 10 kilovolt electrical substation supplying the facility. This triggered a fire and a complete power loss that forced an emergency shutdown of oil operations. According to a source from Ukrainian security, this event marked the eighth successful operation against Russian oil refining and pumping sites since the beginning of the year, with each incident imposing significant financial setbacks on Russia and complicating fuel logistics for its armed forces. The facility in question is a key component in the oil transport network of the Kuban region, providing energy to the Apivsky and Ilsky refineries. Local Russian officials noted, as usual, that remnants from a downed Ukrainian drone were responsible for igniting the fire at the substation in Novovelichkovskaya village, although the fire was later contained. In addition, Russia's defense ministry stated on February 20th that it intercepted drones over Crimea and one over Bryansk. The Ukrainian Navy, alongside developers of unmanned maritime systems, is actively assembling a range of resources aimed at safeguarding Ukrainian waters from potential Russian drone incursions. During the Defense Tech Innovation Forum 2025, Brigadier General Ivan Lukashevich, or Hunter, of the Security Service of Ukraine, explained that Russian forces are now attempting to replicate Ukraine's techniques, strategic approach, and technological applications, albeit a couple of years behind. He noted that because unmanned vessels operate without crew, they can be utilized to conduct hybrid assaults. In response, the Ukrainian Navy, together with strategic defense teams, are advancing the tactics and means to counter these threats. General Lukashevich detailed that the prospective defense architecture could involve several integrated components, including specialized surface drones. These vehicles would be designed to conduct patrols, carry out search operations, and neutralize hazards using onboard machine guns. He mentioned that there are multiple models currently under evaluation, some capable of enduring extreme conditions over vast distances of up to 1,700 kilometers. This extended operational range would allow them to provide continuous protection of the Black Sea and respond to similar unmanned maritime challenges. The general also highlighted that these surface platforms come equipped with advanced search and reconnaissance technologies. When combined with airborne unmanned systems deployed on these vessels, they create a robust patrol network. Although these patrols in the Black Sea are already underway, they are being executed discreetly and away from the public eye. During his presentation at the forum, Lukashevich shared previously unseen footage from combat operations that illustrated one such armed maritime drone engaging with Russian helicopters at the Black Sea. The showcase drone featured a stabilized turret fitted with a large caliber machine gun, a configuration similar to the one deployed during the December operation by Special Forces near Kerch. It was reported that in December of 2023, the Russian Kingisepp machine building plant KMZ in St. Petersburg, a manufacturer specializing in boats for Russian security entities and unmanned maritime systems, introduced the Oduvanchik. The unmanned vessel was ordered in a batch of 10 by the Russian Ministry of Defense for experimental purposes at that time. The Security Service of Ukraine, in collaboration with the police, announced the apprehension of a man suspected of carrying out an extremist act in the heart of Odessa on February 20th. According to information from the SSU, National Police, and the Southern Region Specialized Prosecution Office in the field of defense, the suspect, a mercenary reportedly enlisted by Russian operatives in exchange for promised financial gain, fabricated and installed a makeshift explosive device in the city center. This device was subsequently activated, resulting in the detonation of an explosive charge beneath the car of a prosecutor from the Southern Region office. Although the explosion injured a passerby and caused damage to several vehicles and a building facade, no lives were lost. Later that evening, as the suspect attempted to escape from Kyiv at a bus station, law enforcement intervened and detained him. An 18-year-old resident of Odessa, he is believed to have been recruited through a Telegram channel that advertised quick financial rewards. Following directives from a Russian intelligence service, he constructed the explosive in a rented apartment, achieving an explosive potential comparable to around 300 grams of TNT, and augmented the device with metal components to enhance its effect. Additionally, he arranged to have a concealed mobile phone with remote access capabilities, which allowed the Russian security service to trigger the explosion from a distance. During the subsequent investigations, authorities recovered his mobile device, which contained communication evidence with foreign operatives. The suspect now faces formal charges related to the politically motivated violent act, with the court considering holding him in pretrial detention without bail, potentially leading to a sentence of 12 years and property confiscation. Swedish officials announced on Friday that they are probing suspected damage to an underwater cable in the Baltic Sea, which may be a deliberate act of sabotage linked to Russia. A Finnish company operating the Sea Lion 1 communications cable, which connects Finland and Germany, reported detecting an anomaly on the line, although they emphasized that telecommunication services remain uninterrupted. The same cable was cut in November under circumstances that led to suspicions regarding the involvement of a vessel from China. Swedish law enforcement has launched an initial investigation into the suspected broken cable east of Gotland within the country's maritime economic zone, although no individuals have been identified at this stage. The Coast Guard has also dispatched a vessel to the scene to assist with the inquiry, while the Swedish Prime Minister indicated on social media that his government is closely monitoring the situation. In parallel, the European Commission announced plans to strengthen security measures for underwater cables, to allocate more funding for advanced deployment techniques, and to boost rapid repair capabilities, while also vowing to enforce sanctions against aggressive actors and vessels believed to be operating outside of Western oversight. According to reports from a Telegram channel known as Dossier of the Spy, 8 Russian drone pilots have lost their vision following incidents where explosive devices, concealed within FPV goggles donated by volunteer groups, were remotely activated. In early February, several sabotage operations took place across various units of the Russian military involving the modified goggles. Between January and February, a number of non-governmental organizations sent roughly 80 sets of Sky Zone Cobra FPV goggles to different military units. All were provided by a single individual, offering them free of charge to the forces. The initial occurrence was documented on February 4th in Belgorod Oblast, when an improvised explosive device concealed within a pair of goggles detonated, injuring a serviceman's face and eyes. Over the following days, similar explosive activations were reported in Kursk, Luhansk, and Donetsk. Investigations revealed that the goggles were rigged with a C4 charge, a detonator, and a battery, with a mechanism designed to trigger when the cooling fan started. Authorities are actively searching for and confiscating the altered devices. According to the same source, the individual responsible for sending the parcels departed the country on February 3rd, flying from Moscow to Istanbul. There have been no official comments from Ukrainian intelligence agencies regarding the matter. Up next, we have economy and aid. On Friday, February 21st, the National Police of Ukraine announced that 26 Volkswagen Crafter vehicles, transformed into mobile forensic laboratories, were delivered with support from the Embassy of Japan in Ukraine and representatives of the United Nations Development Program. These mobile units are equipped to quickly and accurately examine incident sites, record evidence related to war crimes, and perform initial analyses of collected materials. Each vehicle features advanced forensic technology, along with specialized ANDE devices that can verify a person's identity within 90 minutes. The vehicles are organized with separate compartments for different types of investigations, including biological, general, ballistic, fingerprint, and trace examinations. They also carry essential equipment such as lighting systems, photography, videography gear, metal detectors, and even a drone designed to capture wide-ranging images of affected areas. The transfer is part of an international technical assistance project aimed at enhancing human security in Ukraine amid the ongoing war, with plans to distribute these mobile laboratories across all forensic units of the national police, prioritizing regions closest to the front lines. Also, Japan has broadened its initiative to offer medical care to injured Ukrainian soldiers. A recent press release from Japan's Ministry of Defense stated that in addition to ongoing rehabilitation services provided at the Central Hospital of Self-Defense Forces, injured Ukrainian servicemen will soon also receive treatment at the hospital affiliated with the National Military Medical College of the Ministry of Defense. This new facility is expected to start accepting patients by mid-March of 2025. Japan began its support for Ukrainian military personnel in June of 2023 when the first 2 soldiers from the Ukrainian Armed Forces arrived in Tokyo to receive care at the Japan Self-Defense Forces Hospital. The Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine has earmarked 7.9 billion hryvnia for the procurement of drones for the defense forces, as announced by Prime Minister Daniele during a government meeting on February 21st. These funds will be directed to the State Service for Special Communications and Information Protection, which will handle the necessary acquisitions. The Prime Minister emphasized that Ukraine's local production in the drone sector is nearly at full capacity, noting a tenfold increase in output this January compared to the same period last year. He further highlighted that during 2023 and 2024, there were substantial boosts in manufacturing of other military equipment. Artillery production tripled, armored personnel carriers increased 5-fold, anti-tank weapons doubled, and ammunition rose by 2.5 times. However, he acknowledged that current domestic manufacturing only meets about 1/3 of the overall weaponry requirements, and the government's target is to elevate this figure to at least half of the demand. Defense Minister Rustem Umerov also revealed that the Ministry of Defense has initiated a new model for delivering drones to the Ukrainian Defense Forces. The approach is designed to accelerate frontline support and promote domestic manufacturing by introducing the DOT chain defense system. This innovative system enables military brigades to specify the type of drones they need based on evolving battlefield conditions, providing local producers with a clearer view of demand to better plan their output. In 2025, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine plans to invest more than 44 billion hryvnia in FPV drone acquisitions. Russian officials have opted to continue restrictions on the export of petrol by companies that are not involved in its production, with the new measure set to begin on March 1st and remain in effect for 6 months. According to a government statement reported by Encore, Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak endorsed the decision as a means to stabilize the market during a period when demand is rising. Companies that operate oil refineries and hold ownership of the facilities will still be permitted to send fuel abroad. Earlier reports by Reuters noted a decline in wholesale petrol and diesel prices on the St. Petersburg International Commodity Exchange between the 10th and 14th of February, a trend influenced by positive developments such as the return of major refineries to operation after drone attacks and discussions about prolonging export restrictions. The new directive builds on the government's previous decision at the end of January to continue with similar limitations for the month of February, which applied to all companies except those producing fuel. And lastly, we have international relations. On February 18th, Ukraine's government press service announced that Ukraine and Moldova have formalized an agreement to boost their joint efforts for European Union membership. The memorandum, signed by Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister Olha Stefanishina and Moldova's Deputy Prime Minister Kristina Gerasimov, sets the stage for closer collaboration on EU enlargement talks, aligning legal frameworks, reforming judicial processes, and securing financial support. It also provides for the exchange of expertise in democratic governance, economic policy, and anti-corruption measures. Stefanishina stressed that despite ongoing global challenges, both nations remain committed to advancing towards European integration together. An action plan will be developed to implement these measures through regular meetings, training sessions, and specialized working groups. Ukraine received EU candidate status in June of 2022, and following recommendations by the European Commission in November of 2023, with subsequent endorsement by the European Council, accession talks are now anticipated. Moldova is targeting membership by 2030 while continuing to maintain its neutral stance, focusing on strengthening partnerships with a range of countries and international organizations to enhance its security. So the next section I'm just going to call a bunch of depressing U.S. stuff. Reuters has revealed that discrete meetings in Switzerland took place between experts from Russia and the United States to explore potential ways to conclude the war in Ukraine. According to 3 sources familiar with the discussions, these private engagements have been occurring over several months, with at least one meeting reportedly as recently as last week. The exchanges, described as an informal communication channel, took place during the period following Donald Trump's election victory on November 5, 2024, with several of his advisors reportedly aware of the efforts. The participants, who possess diplomatic and security expertise, are not formal government officials, and it remains unclear whether they were acting under official government directives. Many aspects of the discussions remain uncertain, including the specific topics addressed, whether representatives from Ukraine were involved, and the exact timeline of when the encounters began. One source labeled the meetings as Track 2 talks, indicating that the focus was on exchanging ideas rather than developing concrete proposals. It was confirmed that at least one session occurred in Geneva last week, coinciding with the Munich Security Conference in Germany. Reuters attempted to obtain comments from the U.S. National Security Council, the Ukrainian government, and the Russian Foreign Ministry, but none responded. This week, following discussions in Saudi Arabia that lasted around 4 hours, high-ranking officials from the United States and Russia were said to have reached a consensus on 4 guiding principles intended to restore normal diplomatic relations and lay the groundwork for resolving the war in Ukraine. The talks emphasized the necessity of ensuring that both nations have fully operational diplomatic missions in Washington and Moscow, a condition seen as essential for making progress. According to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the agreement also included plans to establish a senior team dedicated to negotiating a lasting resolution for the war in Ukraine, one that would be acceptable to all parties involved, and to initiate preliminary talks on potential future geopolitical and economic cooperation that might arise from a cessation of hostilities. The dialogue was maintained by a core group consisting of U.S. officials, including the Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor, and a special envoy, along with key representatives from the Russian government. U.S. officials stressed that lasting peace could not be achieved through isolated interactions, but required continuous and meaningful efforts, and thanked the government of Saudi Arabia under the leadership of the Crown Prince for hosting the meeting. Representatives from Ukraine and the United States collaborated late into the night until early Friday on a draft deal concerning rare earth minerals again, according to a source from Ukraine's presidential office. The U.S. administration considers the arrangement to be part of a wider set of discussions with Russia aimed at resolving the ongoing war. The source explained to Suspilne that while the teams worked intensively until the morning, it remains too early to determine whether the revised draft ultimately benefits Ukraine, as several security concerns still need to be addressed. A senior U.S. official speaking to Axios mentioned that an updated version of the agreement was sent to Kyiv on Thursday by the Trump administration. This revised proposal is intended to help resolve the current impasse between the two nations. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz expressed strong confidence that President Zelensky will sign the agreement, noting that an economic partnership with the United States represents a significant advantage for Ukraine in the near term. These negotiations come in the wake of President Zelensky's rejection of an earlier proposal from the Trump administration, which had extended beyond minerals to cover ports, infrastructure, and energy sectors, and provided very weak security guarantees. President Zelensky has made it clear that he could not compromise his country's integrity by signing that agreement. The Trump administration has also halted the processing of immigration applications from migrants who entered the United States under humanitarian programs established during Biden's presidency. According to 2 U.S. officials, the review of these applications, submitted by individuals from Ukraine and several Latin American countries, has been paused indefinitely as authorities conduct fraud screenings and work to refine their vetting procedures. Legal experts noted that many of these migrants, having received only temporary work permits and limited deportation protection, sought additional protections. The new decision means that Citizenship and Immigration Services will no longer process any related applications or other benefit requests from migrants admitted under these programs during the Biden administration. And lastly, this week, European leaders convened on Monday in Paris for emergency talks aimed at reconciling differences in response to a sudden policy reversal by the new U.S. administration under Donald Trump regarding the war in Ukraine. The meeting was marked by sensitive discussions, especially as many nations expressed strong reservations about proposals that included the possibility of deploying troops. According to President Macron, shortly before the summit, he engaged in telephone discussions with President Trump. Although no joint declaration or significant announcements were issued during the meeting, participants likely feel that major statements should be reserved for platforms such as the EU or NATO. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk observed that the transatlantic relationship, the NATO alliance, and long-standing ties with the United States have entered a new stage. Meanwhile, the head of the European Commission emphasized that Ukraine's quest for peace should be achieved through a posture of strength, ensuring that any solution respects its independence, sovereignty, and territorial boundaries, while also providing robust security assurances. NATO's leadership conveyed that Europe remains prepared to act even as final details are yet to be determined. Macron described Trump's return to the White House as a dramatic and unexpected shift, cautioning against any peace agreement that might be seen as a surrender of principles. A prominent French newspaper characterized the emerging rift between Europe and the United States as momentous, arguing that Europe is now responsible for managing its own defense and that the era of European passivity has ended, with the continent's security increasingly reliant on its own unity and resolve. And those are the main headlines this week. We will now move to the next segment.
Yeah, that would be me. Thanks, Joseph, for the news. Unexpected return. Wouldn't say that. Hello, guys. As always, I will now present this week's most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. Just before I start with my segment, I want to point out that we had federal elections today in Germany. Some of you were even discussing it in the comments or in the chat. I will not be talking about that during my segment, but I guess some of you might have some questions about it, so we will talk about it later during Q&A in case you have questions. Yeah, move over to the segment. On Monday, the German government has updated its website on the military assistance of Ukraine and has published that they have delivered the following to Ukraine in the past 5 weeks. 300 HF-1 Reuting munitions, 14 Hornet XR UAVs, 245 RQ-35 Hydron UAVs, 29 Songbird UAVs, 51 Vector UAVs, 4 Zutana 2 self-propelled artillery systems, 56 FFG MRAPs, 16 mine plows, 2 VIS and 1 MC mine-clearing tanks, 8 border protection vehicles, about 4,200 assault rifles, precision rifles, machine guns, and more, ammunition for the IRIS-T SLS launchers and IRIS-T SLM fire units, 41,000 rounds for the Gepard and Cheetah Sparks, ammunition for the Leopard 1A5 main battle tanks, ammunition for the Marder 1A3 infantry fighting vehicles, 2,000 122 shells, 50,000 155 shells, 74,000 40mm rounds for the automatic grenade launchers, 645 laser rangefinders, 27,800 wool blankets, and last but not least, 37,200 tourniquets. Long list, but good for Ukraine. Next up, also on Monday, the German embassy in Ukraine has announced that they have handed over 16 Volkswagen pickups financed by the German government to the National Guard of Ukraine for the protection of critical infrastructure. So we basically put a big machine gun, like a Browning or something, at the back of the vehicle and use it for the mobile fire squads. And last but not least, the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine yesterday announced that the Federal Police of Germany has donated a Liebherr crane. According to the border guards, this crane significantly, or quote, significantly enhances the ability to respond quickly to the most in the most difficult conditions. Yeah, and that's already it for my segment. Yeah, back to you, Joseph.
Well, we can get into a little bit of the election stuff now if you want, but first I got some extra bits, and then I guess would move to Q&A, and then yeah, we can talk about the election at that point or at this point. Anyway, yeah. So just stuff I'm gonna say, the stuff I didn't feel like was long enough for like a full story in the news, or things that happened too recently for me to actually put in the news. So the first one is the Ukrainians captured North Korean soldiers in Russia, and they're fighting Ukraine and South Korean troops, and that like they totally believe this, and they're like psyched up about it. Basically, I don't know, just kind of an interesting tidbit. South Korea did do something, a small humanitarian thing. I want to say like a few 100 million or 20 million for something, but I forgot to write that down. So anyways, my point is South Korea is not currently involved in Ukraine. No, just, I don't know. To me, it's just kind of frustrating that like, I don't understand why the South Koreans are so worried about escalation when their enemies are literally lying and saying that they're fighting in Ukraine. But, that's me. That's my perspective. Moving on, Google's Threat Intelligence Group, which is a group that like identifies hacking threats and stuff, has identified a rise in Russian state-backed hacking attempts aimed at compromising Signal chat messenger accounts. So there's an app called Signal I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with it. If you're not, it's like an encrypted chat app that is considered, I would say, the most secure. I would say by now, most people consider WhatsApp to not be secure. Like most governments can kind of get into it if they need to. But Signal is considered pretty robust. I wouldn't totally bet the farm on it, but it's generally considered to be one of the stronger. So we're seeing Russia attempt to compromise that system. I don't know. I don't want it to be interesting to see what they can do, but like it'll be, as far as I understand, it's quite a difficult system. So, we'll see what happens, I guess. Mr. Germinate, any thoughts about this stuff so far, or should I just keep going?
No thoughts about that. Just wanna point out that your I don't know, Trump is cutting off your internet or whatever is happening with you. You might want to reconnect after. Yeah.
Okay. You want to talk a little about the German election, and I'll do a little.
It was fine at the end. I think when you now continue, it's fine. I just wanted to make you aware that you're a little bit Optimus Prime like.
Oh man. Okay. Thank you very much. So the next two are just a quote from Budnov. Budnov basically said that he saw the strategic planning of Russia to 2045. Like he saw their file. That was like our plans until 2045. And he basically said, like, it clearly states that, like, we need to get out of Ukraine by 2026, or we need to stop fighting the active war in Ukraine. Otherwise, we will lose the opportunity to be a superpower or even a regional leader in the near future. So that's just Budnov saying, like, according to him, from the Russian perspective, they feel that they have maybe another year of gas left in this, eating away at the bones of their civilization, basically. So, I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's not. Budnov says a lot of things, but he very candidly. So just an interesting quote from Budnov there. And then the last one that I have, and then we can talk a little bit about the peacekeeping stuff. On Saturday, Ukraine's Air Force Command said that a record 267 Russian drones were launched in a single coordinated attack across the country. So it was according to the president, the largest drone attack there were. So maybe a scary indicator of Russia's increased ability to manufacture drones and use them in coordinated operations. And then I just wanted to get your thoughts or your input on a lot of European nations came out this week. It was just sort of the item on the agenda, I guess you could say, to ask politicians, like, are you guys going to send peacekeepers to Ukraine? The answers are pretty much what we would expect. In other words, like, Denmark's like, yeah, we're down. Netherlands is like, sure. Germany is like, yes, if like 8,000 conditions are met that will never be met. So no. UK, I think, is like, yes. France is like, yes, but they'll probably send like 5 people. I think Canada said maybe or yes. Am I getting all that right? Does anyone have any corrections they want to make on which specific countries? Or just any thoughts about this in general? I think Ireland did a week. Like, it will be a very difficult undertaking. I would say, the countries that do want to do it are, I don't know. It's good they want to do it, but man, it's going to be a difficult undertaking. So it's going to take a lot of resources and I don't know, capabilities to do it.
Yeah, I don't know if. Sorry, finish first.
Go ahead. So we just need as many countries on board as possible.
Yeah, no, I just don't know if Colby wants anything to say to that. But from my perspective, I just find it really weird because Zelensky didn't want these negotiations now in the first place. I mean, we have them now. Trump forced it on the Ukrainian people, but they didn't want it now. So why are we giving the US like fuel and I mean, when we are saying, okay, we are ready to put peacekeeping troops on like in Ukraine, we're kind of justifying the talks which the Ukrainians didn't want in the first place. So I really don't understand why so many countries are going forward, my personal opinion, and saying, yeah, we're ready. It's like Ukraine didn't want this in the first place. They're not ready to say, okay, we're done. So yeah, just my 2 cents on that. I really don't understand why France and Great Britain and all that went forward and says, yes, we're putting boots on the ground, like once there's peace. It's, yeah, my opinion.
Yeah, I think your point is broadly correct. I think what it comes down to, if I could try to explain like why I think it is a thing, because I think you're right that it's not really, when it comes to actually resolving this, it really comes down to, can the Europeans get the material together to give to Ukraine? I think that's what it comes down to. Like, can they produce enough shells and so on and so forth? But I think what it comes down to is, it's very clear that the U.S. has pivoted in a very like astonishing way, kind of against the Europeans, or the Europeans are no longer, I would say, in the U.S. orbit strategically in terms of Ukraine, right? And so what it means is, like, a lot of people are asking if you basically, I think the question now is like, is Europe's, it's now down to like Europe and Ukraine against Russia. Like, the U.S. has kind of made itself irrelevant in terms of the one thing I would say that is still relevant is, will the U.S. keep the sanctions on Russia? But in terms of like, the U.S. just undermined its own position. Like, we're no longer a major stakeholder in this, as far as I can tell. We've kind of checked out of it. We're making a bunch of noise about it, but I don't know, like, if we're not actually making decisions on the ground and other countries are, then we're not. It's what it comes down to is, it becomes about Europe and Ukraine making an agreement with Russia, right? If Europe and Ukraine don't agree, then it doesn't really matter what the U.S. does outside of making everyone's life really difficult by removing the sanctions. So what that means is the question becomes, is Europe serious, right? That's the question on everyone's mind. And because people are impatient, and the answer, which is the real answer, which is like, well, is their industrial base going to scale up like Russia's has and actually give Ukraine the equipment they need to win a war? Or are they going to continue to kind of, half do it? And that's not really viable anymore because the US won't bail them out. And so, because everyone's too impatient to just like wait and like study all those graphs and numbers, the easiest answer is like, well, will you send soldiers and put boots on the ground, right? Like, that's what, you know what I mean? Like, that, to a journalist, that's the easy way to answer that question. And by having that Europeans answer like, yes, we're willing to do it, that's just them saying like, yeah, that's them trying to say to this new situation they're in, like, yes, we're serious about this. We are now going to take this issue on ourselves without the US like coordinating it, and we're going to do it. You know what I mean? So I think that's why it has become a central issue, even though I totally agree with you. It's not really the central issue at the end of the day. We also had someone I wanted to mention to me that Erlen actually wrote an article about this as well. So if you saw the episode last week, Erlen had a guest, Fabian Hoffman, on. It was a great interview kind of about the topic. If you're kind of interested in those ideas, Erlen wrote an article on the same topic, which we're talking about right now, which is European peacekeepers in Ukraine and like what that would involve. So yeah, maybe take a read if you have time at Tochnyi.info. So I don't know. So that's, to me, that's kind of my answer to your question. Like, why does it matter? I would say it doesn't matter, but it's sort of a symbolic thing at this point. Go ahead.
I just want to point out, so first of all, I'm just sharing the article on my screen on the Tochnyi website. As you can see, it's a very long and very detailed article, and I put a lot of work in it. So definitely check it out. I just want to point out, I totally agree with you that maybe they have to answer these questions, but it would be important to me that they answer it behind closed doors. There's like, it's one thing to prepare behind closed doors and, have negotiations, have talks, and prepare for the worst outcome, as governments should do. But it's another thing to go public and say something. At least from my perspective, it's I have the German approach. For me, I would go, public when Ukraine approves it and when we have actually something to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good point that like Ukraine didn't really ask for peacekeepers on the ground at any point that I'm familiar with. Colby, did you have any thoughts on this?
I would just agree that discussions about peacekeepers seems awfully premature when there was no peace to keep.
Yeah, definitely. I think that Poland has sort of made a fair case in the past, which is basically like, the idea is we have a million or plus, probably more than a million. I haven't looked at the number, but we have a bunch of refugees in our country. Like, this is unacceptable. What we want to do is set up like a safe zone in Ukraine so that a lot of those refugees can go back to Ukraine, and we'll put peacekeepers there to like keep it safe so that the refugees will be safe, basically. And like that was an idea that was floated by Poland that I think is maybe something that could happen at some point, but like many ideas from Poland, I don't think it's really going to happen. So, I just wanted to point that out as like maybe one way a peacekeeping force could be used during the war. But I totally agree with you, Colby, that like it doesn't look to me like Russia has any intention of agreeing to any kind of peace right now. Their goals seem still completely maximalist, and Ukraine hasn't been presented any offer by either party that offers any meaningful security guarantees or Russia actually stopping. So yeah, it doesn't look like Ukraine's not going to stop fighting because they'll die. So I agree with you. There's no real peace to keep here yet until Russia stopped, basically. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this before we move to Daniela's presentation?
Nope.
I have some thoughts. I mean, good evening to everyone. I was
Hello, Mr. Daniele. Yeah, go ahead.
so I was listening to the first part of the talk about the peacekeeping force, and this article essentially I think has been very useful to explain the difficulties in creating a meaningful force, which probably is not even the 100,000 personnel that has been detailed in the article, which came from a declaration from Zelensky. So it's a buzz number. In reality, the number is likely to be higher, not only because, as the article says, that there is a ratio of at least 3-1. Of course, probably for a peacekeeping mission, 3-1 should be okay because you are not in an active conflict. But as personal note that comes from some discussion, at least here in UK, the idea of the peacekeeping force is a political move for sure, also to try to show willing to do something and try to show the fact that Europe is ready to put something at stake. But it's not very well received when you speak with people that do mission planning or have contact with the military in the MOD, because the reason why, and you can even stop here on this map, the front line is huge. And I personally disagree with Kaufman, who wrote a very nice thread saying that you don't need to be everywhere. Now, this is not possible for several reasons. We are, as Colby said, in a very direct way. There is no peace at the moment. And even if they come to some kind of agreement, we have an history of violation, if you want, on both sides. But we know that, I mean, Ox has been very much stark to say that most of the violation came from the Russian side, from the separatists and from Russia. So the likelihood that any, and I say any, hole in that line left by poor manning or not omnipresence of an eventual international force, so any hole there will pose a threat. And also there is a common sense, and maybe this doesn't come to most of the people because they are not military, they do not have done service, especially in Afghanistan, or very prolonged active mission in a foreign country. When you are exposed for several months, year, to an enemy that is actively working against you, so it's not like Bosnia when the war was over and essentially was avoiding small skirmish. This is a true army that stand their ground. And so one side, Russia, will probably start to study our forces and will start to understand the point of weakness, the reaction times. And also remember that Russia will never stop to will to expand. So they will try to test our forces there with covert operation, using separatists, using terrorism. So how you react, in which way you react. And in any case, you will be studied, information will be gathered. If they fly a drone, even if you take down, it will be very difficult to then point the finger. Okay, so this will expose these troops to incredible danger. And also due to the fact that this is a peacekeeping mission, it will make them not able to act as they are there to fight a war or an active conflict. So the point is that it's a very high risk mission with very difficulties in understanding how you should engage or how you should behave, and will anyway require an enormous amount of resources, especially in ISR, countering eventually ballistic missile or whatever, which will require a very substantial commitment financially and in terms of resources that will not be able to be deployed anywhere else, for example, in the Baltics, in other hot areas. So essentially, you are risking a lot for gaining small or nothing. And if a conflict is started, it will be probably started by the opposing force, which has been given time to organize and hit you. So you will not start from a point of strength, but from a point of weakness. Okay, so all these things, and this, I mean, I spoke with several people, makes especially MOD UK very reluctant to say, oh, this is a very nice idea. It's better to take a high risk, progressively increasing pressure with presence, maybe at the beginning only for training, and then we will see, and try to use a controlled escalation to try to see how much we can push and how much we can help, because we will be in charge of deciding this, what is at stake, and also at our own pace without exposing too much. Because doing in this way will not end up properly. And in the article detailed this very well. Even a simple guy ending on a mine or in a minefield. So it's very dangerous. Is not protecting Ukraine enough, and is exposing the entire mission to an enemy that is planning already probably to invade in a few years. And also we are going to weaken other areas. And even if we capitalize on this and then we are able to increase our defense spending and recruit more people, you have to keep these forces for several decades there, always ready, always rotating. The cost, when you start to do the math, it will be much higher than doing something proper, which is doubling our support in terms of direct aid to Ukraine. In fact, Zelensky and many times said, give us the tool and we will do the job. Never ask, come here and do some policing, because that is not required. It might be good because people will feel this, but at this point, if you have to do something like that, it's better to do it for training at the very first, and then start to look at solution on how you can, for example, police the sky and try to protect at least a civilian target more closer to Western Ukraine. And that's my whole point. Sorry for the very lengthy technical rant.
No, I think a lot of people appreciate it.
And yeah, so we'll see everyone next week. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
On behalf of the brave.